10 to the power of 80. So there are significantly more chances of having different life forms than there are atoms in this universe. And it's a lot. Now, I think for religious people, the fact that life has no particular purpose is kind of a disturbing thing, right? People want life to have a purpose. They want it to have meaning. And I don't think I think it's fine. We can attribute meaning to life, but I don't think it has to have it automatically. I think that that's kind of weird and wrong. That our existence doesn't have to have meaning, but we can give meaning ourselves. The second reason why it's difficult for people to accept evolution is because there is no real direction that it goes. Now, we tend to think, I think because maybe we're a little egotistical, that we were inevitable. It's like, oh, life always gets more complex, or eventually some intelligent life form is going to develop. Not really. There's no reason to expect that we would develop like that. I mean, we exploit a particular niche. We're smart. That's cool. So what? Lots of other species develop better niches than us. It just turns out that, well, when you're smart like us, and I say like us, maybe not everybody, but when you're but when you're smart, well, sometimes you can have other kind of advantages. The advantage that we have is that we invent things, we spread culture, we spread knowledge. I mean, how many of you have really, is there any inventors here? Any of you make the stuff that you use every day? The cell phones on you, clothes that you wear? None of you manufacture these things. You're relying on other human beings to have come up with these ideas, to have manufactured them, to have distributed them. Think about how much of your life is just a consequence of other people thinking for you. Hell, you could just sit on your ass, play video games all day, contribute nothing, it wouldn't matter. There's millions of other people making new inventions, new ideas, and you're benefiting from it. How awesome is that? Nobody else gets to fucking boast that, right? Every other life form has to toil, but for now, and I say for now, but for now, you can kind of enjoy life. It's kind of special. Now, the third reason, I think actually this is the biggest reason why people reject evolution, is because it promotes something called scientific materialism. Is anybody here sort of familiar with what that means? No? A couple of you? Scientific materialism is actually the belief that everything is the product of natural laws and forces. And there's nothing else. There's no spiritual component, there's no supernatural element to it. Everything that you see here is just a product of those laws. And as far as we know, there are basically 4 laws. The weak and strong nuclear forces, electromagnetism, and gravity. I hope I'm not forgetting that. I also look like a fucking idiot. Anyways, everything that every chemical reaction, everything is actually a product of these laws. So, to religious people, you can obviously tell why that would be so scary, right? All of a sudden, it removes God from the equation entirely. That's why I was saying before. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that the guy who came up with evolution also decided there really is no God. Interestingly enough, scientific materialism was thought of by Charles Darwin, but he didn't actually really mention it very much. It was in his notebooks, in his unpublished notebooks, but even he considered it almost too controversial to publish. It was only later that he actually found that stuff. You had a question?
Just more of a statement, really. One of the things that I always noticed was Christians, evolutionary naysayers, I always just ask them, I mean, where in evolution does it deny God? To me, it seems, evolution doesn't say there is no God.
Well, I'm going to get to that.
Life. I'm
going to get to that part later of, is it possible to believe in evolution and still be religious? I'm going to talk about that soon, so thanks for bringing it up. But I want to go back to just materialism for just a second. I mean, I think the reason why materialism is such a dangerous idea is I think that people want to believe that there's actually another component that exists beyond the material world. And just, if you want the first and most important concept of that, let's say the afterlife. For the afterlife to exist, materialism has to be wrong. There has to be a duality. There has to be something beyond the material world in order for people to be, to be able to go to heaven, in order for them to experience this afterlife. Actually, I'm going to transition now to if you can believe in evolution if you're religious. I know a lot of people that are religious and that believe in evolution. Have any of you heard about a man by the name of Kenneth Miller? Yeah, a couple of you guys. One of his recent books was called Finding Darwin's God. It was actually a great book. I mean, I love Ken Miller, don't get me wrong. Ken Miller is one of the principal individuals involved with defending evolution in the Dover trials in Pennsylvania. So when groups were trying to introduce intelligent design in classroom, Ken Miller, who was himself a Catholic, was one of the people that was most responsible for trying to defend the scientific views. Like, intelligent design is not scientific theory, it's basically a dress-up form of creationism, and it has absolutely no place in it. So I like Ken. And in his book, he tries to defend the, looking at evolution and believing in God, because he doesn't just believe in God, he believes in the virgin birth, he believes in Jesus' death and resurrection. And you would think to yourself, well, that kind of conflicts with what you're saying, right, Ken? So his argument's actually, it's a little bit tough for me to explain, but one of the things that he criticizes is the God in the gaps argument, right? He says that this is a bad idea for religious people to try to exploit, because every single time anyone has ever put God in the gaps, science has answered that question. I'll give you a classic example. Take a look at Isaac Newton. Right? Isaac Newton comes up with the universal law of gravitation and a bunch of other pretty impressive stuff. Let's just say that Isaac Newton was the shit. But there's a few things that he couldn't answer. He wondered, why is it that all the planets are on the same plane? No idea. So what was his answer? God did it. It wasn't until Immanuel Kant, philosopher, came up with the answer to that. And it's basically that as solar systems form, the nebula clouds basically coalesce and form a hot, very thin disk before it actually becomes planets. So the God in the gap argument fell. And every single time that we have put God in the gaps, it's been proven time and time again that it's a terrible idea. So Ken Miller's right in saying, maybe we shouldn't rely on the whole God in the gaps argument. But interestingly enough, he uses this very argument. His argument is to say that, I don't know if any of you know what quantum determinacy is. You know this? Okay, just let me explain it quite quickly. It is, if you're trying to take an atom, and you want to figure out where is the position and velocity of an electron, okay? To discover that, you actually have to bounce a photon off of it. And if you do that, you determine where it is. So by observing it, you are determining where it is. So the idea in Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is that it exists as really more of a probability than a certainty. And Ken Miller tries to argue that this is how God operates. He operates within this quantum world, and that's how he makes the changes. So if we evolve, it was because he made slight alterations in using this principle of quantum mechanics. Now, I don't know if you guys agree to this, but this is a stretch. This is another example of God in the gaps as an argument. This is not even an argument. It's almost embarrassing for a man like Ken Miller to come up with this, but he has no choice. He understands the same thing that Gould was talking about, that if you go back and you replay the tape, there's no reason to assume that we would be here. There's no reason to even assume that there'd be any intelligent creatures. But for him, he's like, it has to work out. And this is what I'm saying, that yes, it is possible for you to believe it, but does it really make sense with the facts? Not really. You can claim that it does. But if you admit to yourself that there is no special place in the evolutionary tree for human beings, then how does that square up with ancient myths of Adam and Eve? How does this square? How as a Christian can you believe that Jesus died for your sins if the original Adam and Eve existed hundreds of thousands of years ago? Just apes. But they didn't get kicked out of a garden, and all of it is just a story. And if the story doesn't exist, what do you have left? An allegory? It seems to be weird that you would just believe, well, I want to believe it because I think it's true, but it's not going to square with evolution. It really doesn't. There it is. Now, there is one thing I just kind of like.